Welcome to the Painting of the Week podcast, where we look at some of the most significant paintings throughout history. Introducing your hosts, Phil Grabsky and Laura Bentham.
Hello, welcome to Painting of the Week. I'm Phil.
And I'm Laura.
Today we're going to talk about a painting. Well, it's not a painting.
No.
We're going to talk about an artwork that is 2,100 years old. So often we've been talking about paintings that have maybe been 100 years old, 200 years old, maybe with Bruegel going back even further than that, Leonardo 500 years old. This artwork is 2,100 years old. And I have been very lucky because I've seen it in person in Naples, and I've seen where the replica of it and the position of it, where it originally was placed, which is in Pompeii. It's called the Alexander Mosaic. And just a reminder, if you want to look at the picture while we're talking about it, if you go to the seventh-art.com website, there is an image of it, as there is always with the podcasts. Now, of course, when you've got it on your screen, just to help you a little bit, it is about, 2.8, 3 meters by 5 meters. It is very large. And just so it's very clear from the beginning, this is not a painting, it's not a fresco. This is made up of tiny little squares of marble, and there is an estimated 1.5 million little squares of marble that were in the original, as I would understand it. Or I could be wrong, maybe that's the 1.5 million squares that are currently in this version, which is obviously a bit damaged.
Yeah. I've got 1.5 million down.
1.5 million. 1.5 million. It's quite... I mean, there's so much to say about this. It's the House of Faun in Pompeii. I mean, if anyone who's never been to Pompeii, that has got to be on your list of places
it's
to
on
visit.
my list. I haven't been.
Oh,
I know. The House of Faun looks incredible.
Pompeii, and even more so Herculaneum, which is just down. It's very close to Pompeii. Talk about time capsules. I mean, quite extraordinary. So, again, for those who don't know, Vesuvius erupts, and Pompeii is a pretty decently sized town. It's got a lot of wealthy people in there. Volcano erupts, and some people think, lava came coursing through the streets of Pompeii. Well, it wasn't like that. What initially happened was that it was basically swamped with noxious gases and very, very fine black powder, essentially. And the powder just filled up everything. So it filled up the roads, it filled up the buildings. It's like water. So imagine flooding, but this was like powder, dust. People died from the gases, and then they were surrounded by this dust. And it went up pretty much, as I understand it, to about the first floor level. At which point then there was a, what do they call it? A pyro. Anyway, the lava then did flow.
Yeah.
And basically, obviously that just shaved everything off the top, but it entombed everything underneath it.
Okay.
So when you see those famous, the kind of the bodies.
Yeah.
So what's happened there is that when they've eventually uncovered Pompeii, which is almost 1,800 years later, they've basically found the holes, if you like. So the body had been in there, the body's decomposed, but into that chamber they would pour plaster,
right?
And then the plaster would form the shape of a human being in real distress, of course.
Yeah.
And it's extraordinarily moving. But it's not only the human forms or the shape of the human form that was saved, but in this case, it was also artworks. I mean, so graffiti. The graffiti on the walls in Pompeii is fantastic. There'd been an election campaign only shortly before, and the comments.
Yeah.
It's such an easy thing to say, but they were just like us. and without some of the technology, of course. But
it's funny, there was graffiti, and the graffiti survives as well.
Graffiti, yeah. So I mean, the excavation.
That's amazing.
And they haven't uncovered it all. Some of it they've left for future generations to dig out.
Oh.
Herculaneum was even better preserved, actually. And Herculaneum is definitely worth seeing. You almost get an even greater sense of what it was like.
Yeah.
And if you can't get down to Naples, go to a place called Ostia, which is on the port of Rome. And that's slightly different. That was just kind of abandoned. But that's a remarkable place.
What, because the volcano was coming?
So Rome, Rome's nothing to do with the volcano.
Okay, I was going to say.
It was just...
Oh, just abandoned.
It just survived.
Uh-huh.
I mean, we made a series called I, Caesar, and some of the best places to see Roman ruins are actually North Africa and Jordan, places like that, where these remarkable Roman cities, amphitheatres and villas, and they were basically absorbed and covered by sand.
Mm-hmm.
They were abandoned and nomadic tribes weren't that interested or whatever. So again, the sand has preserved them.
Yeah.
And sometimes you go into these theatres and it just feels like yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Mosaics play an enormous... I mean, I'll never forget the day we visited and then subsequently filmed in Tunis. They've got the most amazing mosaic museum in Tunis. They are the most beautiful works of art. Yeah. And you've got everything. You've got portraits and you've got vines and you've got animals. And of course, North Africa used to have a lot of the wild animals we now associate with Southern Africa. They would have elephants and lions, and a lot of them were then taken to Rome and were kind of used in their gladiatorial games. And
yeah, it's a fascinating technique, isn't it? Mosaic. It means so time consuming, and I don't know. I just don't know how they managed to get this like it is. It's incredible.
It's amazing. I mean,
it's amazing.
There is a thought with this that it's a copy of a painting or a fresco from 200 or 300 years earlier.
Okay.
Which has been lost. So to what extent it's an accurate copy is hard to tell.
Right.
I'll have a think about that. But the Roman, and to some extent the Greek, but the Roman artisans that could create these kind of mosaics, they could do it from scratch too. It didn't have to be copying something from earlier in history.
No.
And if you look at it, the perspective, the foreshortening of the horses, the characterization on the faces, the shading.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
I mean, it looks, as we're looking at it now on a screen, it looks like it's painted very carefully. It's all tiny, tiny little bits of marble. So
you've seen the replica in the House of Fawn.
So the House of Fawn has a replica.
Yeah. And the real one's in...
It's beautiful, fab, one of my favourite museums in the world, the Archaeological Museum in Naples.
Okay. Another place to go.
100%. Naples is...
Yeah, no, I'd love to go
absolutely there. Such a place to visit. And of course, they have in there so many things that were then rescued from the coastline. Because it's not just Pompeii and Herculaneum that were affected by the Vesuvius explosion, but all these villas up and down the coast, within range of the lava flow. And they found the most amazing artworks. We've perhaps talked before. I mean, the film that we made last year but was delayed because of COVID, so it's coming out this year. And we're in November 2021, we're releasing our Raphael film.
Oh yeah.
You can't understand artists like Raphael without understanding that just at the time that he's painting in the 16th century, in Rome, they are uncovering all these amazing Roman statues that had been buried, that had been covered up by earth and whatnot. And they're pulling out these statues and they're saying, how did these people 1,600 years before us, how were they so good? So it'd be like if you found something in your garden now from the 4th century and it's the most beautiful statue or the most beautiful kind of jewellery, or you're thinking, really? How do they do that?
Mm-hmm. No formal training.
No formal training. Well...
Or maybe. Do you think?
Oh, they had workshops. I mean, I think one of the things was they realised just how much formal training they did have, all these sculptures. And so you would have had groups of, you'd have had workshops of people doing mosaics.
Yeah.
All right. What do we know about? Let's start with the subject matter of the... Now, I know you've done a little bit of reading about
Well,
this.
I've got
So what do we know?
6 pages. Alexander the Great.
Laura, it's brilliant. Okay, what do you know?
Well, only that he liked a bit of a fight, didn't he? He did love a bit of a fight. He was from Macedonia.
Yep.
Started off. I mean, he did travel.
Yep.
And I just can't work out. Sometimes when I was watching some of the things I was watching, I thought, even I go to really weird things and start thinking about how they cooked for everybody. And, these people are not going to fight on an empty stomach and just silly things like that. Just how do they get all the food and the camps? But he went miles, over 8 years.
Yeah.
To what they called was sort of end of Asia or end of the world or the known world.
Yeah.
So, yes, I did do my best. But yes, he certainly did. There's a lot of people around because of all the battles he had, I suppose. And a lot of people not around because of them.
Well, I mean, he changed history.
Yes.
I mean, we have to be... The thing that's interesting about this, of course, is this is a work of propaganda. So it was propaganda when it was first, let's say, painted.
Yeah.
And it's propaganda now for this wealthy Roman family. Mm-hmm. So one has to be a little bit cautious about what really happened, who Alexander really was, what this battle really was, and how it's being presented. But what we know, Alexander the Great, the first history series that I made for Channel 4 was called The Great Commanders.
Yeah.
And Channel 4 in the UK, they'd never done military history before, and it took about a year to get through. On the one hand, I had 2 commissioning editors really supporting me, and I had a couple of people saying, Channel 4 shouldn't be doing military history. That's not our remit.
Right. So
it took a while. And anyway, in the end, we got away. And it was 6 films about 6 military commanders. And from Alexander, it was by accident from A to Z. It was Alexander the Great. And then we did Julius Caesar, Horatio Nelson, Napoleon, Ulysses S. Grant, and Marshal Georgy Zhukov, who basically is the most important commander of the Second World War. There's no question that people like Rommel and the rest of them were important. When you think 20-odd million Russians died, Georgy Zhukov, the most important commander of the Second World War.
Okay, well, I think I need to watch that one then.
Do you know what? It's funny. Of all the films we have on platforms like Amazon, The Great Commanders is still frequently the most popular. We get quarterly reports.
Yeah.
There's something really appealing about the mix of history and military history. And the way that we did it was because most of my films have been biographical, not entirely intentionally, but I just love looking at people's lives and trying to turn that into a film. We've talked about this before. But what I did with this one was that each film focused on one battle.
Okay.
So Napoleon was the Battle of Austerlitz. Georgy Zhukov was the Battle of Berlin. And actually, Alexander the Great, we did focus on the Battle of Issus.
Right.
This is the Battle of Issus.
Yes.
Alexander the Great, son of Philip Macedon. And incidentally, there's still a dispute, about the use of the word Macedonia. So even today, the Greeks claim Macedonian as their own in a sense. And then you've got the former Yugoslavian state of Macedonia. Anyway.
There's always a fight, isn't there? There's always a bit of argy-bargy.
Well, this seems to be, we're talking, 330 odd BC?
Yeah.
So 2,300 and something years ago. And the Macedonians, the Greeks, you've got the Macedonians, the Spartans, the Athenians, but you've also got the Persians. Persians were a major cult, empire. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that is worth bearing in mind these days when America kind of gets into such fights with Iran, Iran thinks to itself, yeah, but we're the descendants of the Persians. What are you? And it's just to help understand the Iranian way of thinking. They know they've got 2,500 years of history.
Yeah.
And that's not only fighting, that's also culture. So sometimes I think that plays into the way that they view the United States. Anyway, don't want to go off on a tangent. Alexander the Great decides he wants to conquer the Persians. That's quite something for a small state. Anyway, first of all, he unites the Greek states.
Yeah.
And what you said about the logistics is absolutely the case. You know, an army, was it Napoleon says an army marches on its stomach?
Yeah.
And so it's fascinating to look, and we talk about it in the film, how he organises himself, how he organises the train that comes behind him, how they feed themselves, how they water themselves.
It's incredible.
It is incredible.
I just can't fathom it.
And you can only go, the fastest you can travel is the speed of a horse. And that horse, by the way, is called Bucephalus. It's a very famous horse. And even the horse is kind of given its own little funky hairdo there, isn't it? It's got nice curly hair and it's...
to match Alexander's.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So he comes down to the battle between these two great leaders. You've got Alexander on the left with his flowing locks and almost like a Roman nose and his very, no helmet. Opposite him, and who he's looking straight at, is the Persian king, Darius. Darius, as you can see, is scared. And he's got every reason to be scared because he is losing this particular battle. Won't go into too much detail except to say that we went to find the actual battle site.
Oh, right.
And I don't even know if I could get there now because of, recent politics. But
yeah.
It's right on the Turkish-Syrian border, on the coast there. And there was a particular stream or small river that came down to the coast, and the armies were ranged up on either side. Persians was a much bigger army, but Alexander, through his training of his army, was able to defeat. Darius actually flees. He's ultimately killed. Alexander is very gracious towards Darius's wife. And anyway, there's a whole big story. But this is the depiction of the crucial moment when, whether they ever got this close, who can tell, but you can see that Darius's army is about to turn and flee.
Yeah.
So he's terrified. There's a horse showing you its rear, which is either making a rude point about Darius, or it's just showing that the horses are turning and fleeing. Got the horses on the right about to run away. Obviously, some of it's damaged on the left, so we can't quite see Alexander's own.
Can I ask you a question about that damage then?
Yeah.
So with the one that's at the House of Fawn now, the replica, have they done it? Have they made it with the damage?
Yeah, I actually, to be honest, I can't remember.
No.
But I mean, if they've put something in there, they've made it up, obviously.
Okay.
I think
it's funny that the damage is there, isn't it, on that side? All of that side, nearly. Is it because people, do you think, would have walked over
No,
it?
it's nothing to do with that. It's obviously when the the volcanic explosion has happened.
Just so happened it was on that side.
Well, I mean, there's various possibilities. The most likely is that when they started to excavate, they might. I actually don't know. No, I'm guessing.
I think we're all going to be guessing on all of this, aren't we?
But it might be that for whatever reason, maybe lava actually made contact.
Okay.
And there's no way you can get lava off without damaging it. It may be that when they first were excavating it, they were a bit haphazard there.
Oh, yeah.
It may have been that it was already damaged through, as you say,
you just don't know.
I mean, there had been an earthquake in Pompeii which had caused damage. So actually, some of the damage you see in Pompeii now precedes the explosion of Vesuvius, so it may have been damaged. I mean, an expert might be able to gather that, but there are certainly, in Tunis and in Naples, there are certainly plenty of mosaics that are in full,
Really?
And it's obviously a great shame that one is damaged. Because, of course, what you've lost is you can see... Yeah, you can see bits of the wheels down there, the chariots.
Yeah.
And luckily,
yeah, it's his face.
And of course, that picture is used all the time. I mean, and that is a picture on his breastplate. That is what's he called? Gorgon.
I have absolutely no idea, Phil.
Yeah,
so I can't help you.
Well, it's the. If you look at it, it's supposed to turn you to stone, anyways. But Darius's lot, with their kind of more Persian armor, and I just think, you look at it. There's
and the horses, and then there's that shield, the one that's on the floor, and he's looking at his face,
he's
reflected, which is just below the black horse.
Yeah, he's obviously aware that he's about to be killed.
Yeah, I don't think there's much hope for him. But
it's the noise and the you can feel the noise and the din of battle. So that's what the picture is about. Now, you can imagine that at the time, Alexander, who's travelling east, Alexander gets all the way to India.
It's incredible.
All the way to India, or Pakistan as we now know it, in India. It is thought... So anytime you see a city called Alexandria or some kind of form of that name, or Iskenderun or places like that, it's places that he has named or named after him. It is thought he dies in near Alexandria. No one's entirely sure.
Doesn't his army just get a bit fed up?
Of
Towards
course.
the end, they've had enough, they want to go home.
Yeah, yeah. Can you imagine? They're away for, I don't know what it is.
Over 8 years,
Over 8
was
years.
it? Or are you saying more?
But even if they're collecting booty, they can't do anything with it. They just got to carry it with them. And then if they have a bad battle, and they might lose their booty. And plus you've got continuous illness, and maybe there are times when the food is running low. And
imagine surviving that many battles, actually coming out. I wonder how many actually did get back.
Yeah, I wonder how many started and how many survived.
I mean, I just can't imagine.
Do you know, when Napoleon invaded Russia in 1812, he went off with over 500,000 soldiers. I think he came back with something like, 30,000.
Really?
I mean, it's just absurd. The amount of people that have died in warfare on this amazing planet of ours is just ridiculous.
But he ends up fighting with a lot of his own commanders as well, doesn't he, towards the end? Which, seems a bit...
They want to go...
stuck with him as well, and then...
They want to go home.
I know.
So, let's go back to the manufacture, because I'd like to tell you, in my house, I've got all sorts of little objects that I've picked up along the way, particularly from... I mean, when I was making the series about great commanders, but even more so I, Caesar, and we went all the way around the Mediterranean. And we were, I've got all these various bits and bobs. And one thing that I've got, if I was going to do a show and tell, if somebody said, come to my school and do a show and tell, but this would be my first choice.
Right.
We were in Tunisia. I can't even remember the name of the town, but it's an old Roman town, and it was kind of abandoned. But you can go down there now and you can see there's an arch. It was all covered in sand, and they've uncovered it. But it's not visited very often, so it's kind of a lot of rubble lying around. Yeah. And, you go there, you do some filming, and then, I don't know, I'm just inquisitive. So you just start scrabbling about the rubble.
Oh, yeah, I definitely would do that.
Now, I wouldn't steal anything. So
No.
sometimes, in Libya too, this was the case, there could be quite big chunks of mosaic on the ground.
Yeah.
Well, if everyone took this stuff, there'd be nothing left. So you deliberately don't. But on this pile of rubble, which was just piled up, it was just little bits of stone and rocks, and I saw a little chunk of white marble, but it was all very uneven. And I thought, that's a strange looking thing. So I picked it up, And very quickly I realised what it was. And I must admit, I hope I'm not going to get into trouble with the Tunisian authorities.
Watch out. They're coming right now.
But I kept it.
Oh, no.
Allegedly.
Okay, good.
Because I realised what it was. And it took me back 2,000 years straight away to some guy, possibly a woman, but unlikely, a guy sitting cross-legged, who's been delivered a piece of white marble. And he's basically taking out the little squares for mosaics. Because on this white bit of marble, what you see is just all the little gaps where little squares being carved out. So this looks like a misshapen lump. But look carefully and you can see what it was for.
Okay, so they actually carved them out, because I thought they just did got the hammer and started smashing it like you do now.
Well, imagine 1.5 million of these things.
Yeah.
So basically they're given a bit of marble, probably little chunks of marble, and they just have to create from that chunk of marble as many tiny little squares as they possibly can. Now, marble. I'd love to make a film just about marble.
Do it. Why
because
not?
if there's one product that for me demonstrates the extraordinary nature of the Roman Empire, it's marble. Roman Empire was encircled what they called Mare Nostrum, RC in the Mediterranean, and as I understand it, and I'm very happy for someone to correct me, but marble comes from various mines, but it's always different. You won't get a kind of particular green-veined marble from two different mines. It just comes from just the way of nature. So, for example, it is extraordinarily lucky for our history that in Carrara, north of Pisa, there is this mountain of pure white, relatively easily sculptable marble. Because from that we get David, we get, that's what Michelangelo would go there and spend 3 or 4 months trying to get a block of marble with pure white. So you can imagine pure white marble. But elsewhere you have purple, you have green, you have red. And the Romans, this is what I find so extraordinary, they knew where all these marbles were. So they're all in different parts of the empire. And you have these kind of designers. So when somebody's building a villa, basically these are facades. They're about 1/4 of a centimetre thick, these sheets of marble. So again, I don't even know how they cut it that well.
No.
Completely flat. I mean, it must have been just the most fine-toothed saws just sawing across a block of marble to create this thin sheet, which they then have to transport hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles. Because some guy, in this case in Tunisia, has said, okay, in my bathroom, I want purple. This is true,
Yeah, it's great.
In my living room, I want green here with a bit of red. And these are all being shipped. So you've got all these people to Ostia. I talked about Ostia, the port of Ostia. You can still see today they've got, in fact, little mosaics in front of the warehouses on the port, which would tell you what the products were.
Right.
So you'd have the marble, this whole chain of people dealing with marble. So you've got your mine in Turkey, and you've got the guy in Tunisia who says, I want purple in my toilet. And so then that information goes off to another dealer, Somebody eventually rolls up in that mine.
Yeah.
Or the marble's been delivered to Rome, what's been delivered. Unbelievable. So you'll get these villas, and some of these places still exist, where you have all these multicoloured marbles.
God, but of course, please make the marble documentary.
Oh, it would be brilliant.
It would be brilliant.
But of course, imagine here. So it's not a painter with all these pigments of colour, but basically these guys are sitting down. They've obviously, I presume they would draw it out first.
Yeah.
But then must have pots and pots and pots and pots of all the as many different coloured marbles as they can possibly get. And it's not like there's 5 or 6 different colours here.
No.
It's not like there's just yellow, blue, red. You've got shades. So they're like, okay, we need a darker one here, we need a lighter one there.
Yeah.
And they must have to keep going back to see if it's working and go forward.
Yeah.
I think it's just.
It is. It's phenomenal. Actually, when you talk about it like that saying that these different pots of marble from everywhere, I mean, that's when it does now take a whole different meaning, doesn't it? Look at this, like you said about the horse.
Yeah.
The different shades just on the horse.
Yeah, to the back.
I mean, it's phenomenal. It's just phenomenal. And look at those tiny little horses there on the chariot.
I know. I mean,
it's just something else.
So there's someone. I mean, I mean, they've ordered, yellow marble, and even the yellows. If you look carefully, there are different shades of yellow there.
So yeah, all of these marbles then coming together. Mind you, I'll tell you one, I can't see purple.
Well,
so
I think that's purple there.
Oh, do you? Okay.
But look at
amazing.
Look at this guy here underneath.
Yeah.
Go down. If you look from Darius going down, one of his kind of serfs is very scared. Look at his Persian trousers there.
Yeah.
Kind of red with a little bit of design on them, and then white shoes.
Oh, the expressions on the face, that horse.
The dead horse.
Yeah, the horse is.
But again, the perspective of that. So there's a guy who's.
And the hooves there.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So that's a Persian there, judging by his trousers and his shoes. His horse has been killed.
Yeah. Well, now you said that, I'm definitely.
It's quite brilliant, isn't it?
The little face as well, back in that reflection.
I know,
I'm fascinated by that face. Yeah. I really am. Yeah. Oh, look, we've really got into this now. Okay. Wow.
Now, why would the okay, so Pompeii, not the wealthiest town in the Roman Empire by any stretch of the imagination, but it had its wealthy inhabitants, and so whoever owned this villa, which is a big villa, was a wealthy man.
They don't know who it was. They don't know any of these people at all.
No, they do.
Out. Okay.
I don't know about the House of Fawn, but there's certainly people that are named from Pompeii, and they do find. I mean, the process of uncovering them and deciphering them, but they do find scrolls and documents, and so no, there are named people. I don't know the House of Fawn. I haven't checked before doing this, but clearly wealthy. This is something that would, again, and you still see this in many cultures to this day. It didn't really matter what the outside of the building looked like. So it tends to be four walls, but then you got a main gate. But when you went inside, you would be met with, in this case, you were meant to be impressed. So you'd have a reception area. You usually had a courtyard. You'd have a little fountain. Oh, yeah. You'd have rooms off. This is very, very expensive. You can imagine. This is in the reception room. So this is a wealthy.
Yeah.
And what is being said here to the guest? Well, the guest is being told that I'm a wealthy man. I'm a cultured man. This Alexander the Great, albeit a Greek commander, there's something quite Roman about him, isn't there? And it's funny though, isn't it, that it was in Rome? Then you don't know. None of us know, but yeah, it is funny because he was Greek. But I mean, I think they're appropriating his, this Macedonian spirit to conquer the world. They're taking it upon themselves, and I think that they're making him look Roman rather than Greek. Yeah. You would be so funny about everyone walking on it, though, wouldn't you? I would be. You'd be tempted to cover it up. And you're just like getting a brand new carpet. Oh, I've just got my. Well, can you imagine? I mean, they're coming 1.5 pieces of mosaic on the floor. I mean, if it's rained and they're coming in off a muddy street. Yeah, exactly. Oh, I'll be freaking out. No, that would definitely. Yeah. But Alexander the Great, then they never found his body, or have they found it now? Still no. No, never found him. There are people. Occasionally there'll be a documentary made about the discovery of Alexander's tomb, but then all nonsense. Do you think it'll ever be found? No. Well, who knows? No idea, but I doubt it. Be interesting. But I think more broadly, and I think again this is what as I said, artists like Raphael discovered or realized in the 16th century. You ignore the past at your peril. If this idea that what we're doing now is the best, we're the greatest artists that have ever lived. We've nothing to learn from the past. What nonsense.
Yeah.
And I think that sculptors like Michelangelo suddenly realized that there were Romans, some of whom were names, some of whom they knew the names of, some of whom they didn't, were sculpting that he considered, well, he probably didn't consider quite his equal, but he considered to be almost his equal.
Right.
Because again, there are plenty of paintings, wall paintings that have survived. Again, they influence Raphael. If you go to the Vatican today, the so-called Raphael rooms, or just in the corridors leading up to them, it's copies of Roman wall paintings that they saw in newly discovered Roman buildings, not least Nero's Golden House in Rome. They suddenly realized that, what artists had been doing 1600 years earlier, they could learn from, and they could admire, and they could aspire to be the equal of. And, we still have these kind of myths and legends, this idea that, the Dark Ages. Well, actually, some of the artwork of the Middle Ages and the Dark Ages is extraordinary.
Yeah.
And, it's kind of pompous and arrogant of us to imagine that what we do is somehow better than what our ancestors could do.
Well, I'm a new person, aren't I? I've started looking at all sorts of things because of this. Only because of this, I was just sitting in my greenhouse happily chipping away at getting the tomatoes sorted out when we first started talking about doing this.
Well, I mean...
Now I've got no tomatoes, it's too wet. But at least I started looking at art.
I tell you what, maybe that's why Alexander went east, because he was just fed up in European rain. Mosaics. I mean, you're on holiday in Tunis, you might not think, I'm going to go to... Or Sousse, I think it was in Sousse. You might not think to go and visit the Mosaic Museum.
Oh, I think I would have done, actually.
It is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And even in Britain, where obviously we are, I mean, some of the mosaics that they found in Sussex.
Yeah.
They absolutely, I mean, it was a real craft, and they're absolutely beautiful. Sometimes it's just patterns, and sometimes it is, more, some of the vines and I think it's incredible. The fruit, you feel like you can just pluck them and eat them. Yeah. And it's all made with these tiny little tesserae, little chips of marble. And you can imagine ships travelling through the empire with different coloured marbles.
I really think you should make that documentary. It sounds fab. Go on, Phil.
If someone
you haven't got enough on.
If somebody commissions it, I'll do it. But the freedom of travel.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, particularly, well, right now it doesn't exist, does it?
No.
But I mean, the ability to travel within Europe has maybe never been equaled than the Roman Empire. I mean, kind of. But it's. I mean, the other thing to say, of course, which is important, is the Roman attitude towards art. This idea that it was important. It was part of your civilization. Yeah. They wanted, there are plenty of people whose needs were just to eat and survive. I suspect some of Alexander's, more junior soldiers weren't too concerned about what was on their walls. But there was a large percentage of Roman population for whom art was really important. And the decoration in your house, wall paintings, mosaics, statues, it was part of your society, part of your civilization. It was important that your town looked good, that there were statues in the main forum, that the buildings, there was a real attitude towards the way they built things that I think we could actually learn a lot from. Yeah,
I think it's still like that today in Italy, surely. I mean, it's fantastic, isn't it? Well, I've only been a few places, and I've always been awestruck. Yeah, I love it. When I realise I haven't even scratched the surface now So it's another place to go back to visit.
Yeah, as soon as we can travel again. Yeah, but I don't know that I'm not sure that in London today there's the same attitude towards kind of. I'm sure there's rather less kind of focus on how aesthetically beautiful a building is or a square.
Yeah.
More of it seems to me to be, how much floor rent can we extract from building the tallest building possible, even if it completely dwarfs the church next door or the.
That is a shame. It really is a shame.
Romans thought a great deal about what is the nature of the ideal city. Now, there's also a political imperative. There's a military imperative. They have big, wide roads to allow troops to go through, and they'll have defensive walls and all. There's other things going on, but beauty was very important. And I think this mosaic is a great example of that.
I think they've nailed it.
They've nailed it.
And they've got the sun.
Yeah, well, I didn't.
And it helps.
It does.
And they've got fabulous food.
It does make a difference it does make a difference if it's sunny and you're sitting outside a lot.
Yeah. And
getting outside. I mean, obviously, you again, the public spaces become more important, don't they? But I mean, we live in Brighton. What would you consider to be our town square?
Yeah, well, just where the town hall is probably still where people get married.
Yeah, but you wouldn't sit out. So you wouldn't wander down to the. No. Like in Spain, they have the paseos, where people go out for a walk to see each other.
What would you think would be the town square? Oh, by the pavilion, maybe. The pavilion's quite something, actually.
Pavilion is quite something, but it's still. Where would you? I guess you'd wander down to the seafront.
We always go to the sea.
Go to the seafront, wouldn't you?
Yeah. We always head to the sea.
But I mean, in Brighton, can you think of any mosaics? There must be some somewhere, but I can't think of any to hand.
Not off the top of my head.
Maybe on the floor of the dome and just never noticed. But it'll probably just be
there is some on the floor in the dome. There is as you walk in.
Probably just a couple of dolphins.
Do you know what? I'm going to have to go and have a look.
Yeah.
I've only ever really
nothing like
been
this,
so busy to get in for a gig that I probably haven't noticed the floor. But actually, the dome is actually quite stunning. Those entrance halls. No, now we need to go and find all the mosaics in Brighton, don't we?
So, moral is, look down.
Look down,
as well as up. Thank you. Until next week.
Thank you for listening to the Painting of the Week podcast. For more information, please visit our website at seventh-art.com or contact us by emailing info@seventh-art.com. See you next time.